So even though this is the first video I'm posting on this YouTube channel, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on introductions just yet. What you need to know for now is that I'm just some guy who made a YouTube channel because I want to make videos. I don't have a gimmick or a brand, and I have no fucks to give about the algorithm or videos getting demonetized. Yep, that pretty much covers it, so moving right along. Just recently, I finished working on these preliminary drawings of a fan art redesign of Catwoman's costume. Actually, saying I finished working on these drawings isn't entirely accurate because they aren't really finished pieces. I should say I decided to stop working on them because I haven't done any shading or rendering yet, as you can see. And I also left out some of the smaller details. For example, anywhere where you see purple in the costume, that is meant to be a crushed velvet material, which you'd be able to tell if I had done some rendering. But I also intended to put a layer of black lace over top of the velvet material, which, obviously, I haven't done any of the work on those details yet. I did start to work on some of the shading, as you can see here, but I decided to stop working on it at this point because I already want to make some changes to some elements of the costume design. Luckily for me, though, the changes I want to make aren't so drastic that I have to start all over. I can still use most of this drawing and still make the changes I want. My sources of inspiration for this are, of course, first and foremost, the comics. In almost every version of Catwoman's backstory, she is almost always some type of sex worker at some point, and in a lot of cases, she makes her original catsuit out of stuff she has on hand given her line of work. So that certainly informed some elements of the design of this catsuit, but I also drew a lot of inspiration from the movie Batman Returns. Michelle Pfeiffer was my first point of reference for Catwoman. Before that movie, I did watch that old campy Batman TV show from the 60s, but I barely remember any of it, to be honest. And when it comes to Catwoman specifically, I don't even recall the plot of a single episode of that show, let alone any scenes involving a specific character, Catwoman or otherwise. But not only was the version of Catwoman we got in Batman Returns the first to have made enough of an impact on me personally that I was actually able to remember the character, that movie also established the iconic look of Catwoman. If you were to walk down the street and ask the first 10 people you saw to picture Catwoman in their heads, and then you asked them to describe what she looked like, I'd guess at least 9 of those people are probably going to describe a woman in a black latex or leather costume with stitching in it. In other words, the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman. This is something that even carried over into the comics. Although Catwoman's costume has gone through a lot of design changes over the years, at some point we did get a black leather-clad Catwoman in the comics as well. And the current design of Catwoman's catsuit in particular does seem to draw a lot of inspiration from the Batman Returns Catwoman. In my opinion, Tim Burton has a stylistic flair that lends itself very well to an IP like Batman, which I think is probably part of the reason why this character design of Catwoman did become so popular. It was a little bit of a departure from the comics, but it wasn't such a drastic change that it made the character unrecognizable. It's a change that fits both the character and the world these characters inhabit very nicely. When you think about it, Gotham City is kinda like Halloween Town's drunken abusive stepfather anyway. Lastly, in terms of the sources of inspiration for the costume design, I am also taking some inspiration from vampires, but more specifically, the aesthetic of the vampires in the Underworld movies. I don't have a huge amount to say about that just yet because I don't think I captured a lot of that in this first attempt at the design, but I think it's an aesthetic that could work fairly well for the character and the world she inhabits. I used Mila Jovovich as a reference model because I've always thought she would make an amazing Catwoman. I did change the hair color to blonde, but that has everything to do with my earliest memories of the character. I already said Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns was my first point of reference, but my next point of reference was Batman the Animated Series, which also featured a blonde Selena Kyle. So, personally, when I picture Catwoman, I see a blonde woman. I chose to use a series of fashion shoot-esque poses for the sake of adding a story element to this artwork, and to give some sense of Catwoman's personality. Catwoman definitely adopts a persona when she puts on the catsuit, and I think these poses show that. Normally, for a turnabout like this, the character would be in a neutral pose, and there's a good reason for that. For example, if you wanted to make a 3D version of this character, which I do intend to do, having the character in a neutral pose makes it really easy to import pictures of the front and side of the character into whatever software you're using, and model the character directly from the concept art. In this case, though, since these poses don't match each other, it would make it a lot harder on the 3D artist. I've got to imagine if I were working as a concept artist and I handed this artwork off to a 3D model or a sculptor, they'd probably hand it right back and say, "Do it again, this time don't get cute or funny with it, just draw the damn character in a neutral pose." But, since I am the 3D artist who will be creating the 3D version of this character, and since I also don't have an art director or anyone over me who's going to get mad about working inefficiently, and since there is no budget or deadline to be concerned about for this project, in short, I get to do what I want and no one can stop me, so ha! So why bother creating this fan art? Well, this artwork is part of a much larger glorified fan fiction project I'm working on. Essentially, I am assuming a hypothetical in which I have, for some inexplicable reason, been handed the reins of the DCEU, and it is my job to create a series of movies that can compete with the MCU. For this hypothetical, I am also assuming that DC and Warner Brothers are essentially hitting the reset button on all of the live-action DC movies, and I have complete and total creative control. This is purely something I'm working on for fun. I have no intention of pitching my ideas to anyone working for either DC or Warner Brothers. I'm also not asking either company to give me a job. Any job, let alone one where I would essentially be the Kevin Feige of the DC movies. This project is going to live and die right here on YouTube. And hopefully, some people will be interested enough to want to take the ride with me. I thought it would be fun to indulge in some speculation about some of the negative reactions some people will undoubtedly have about some of the design choices I've made in this artwork. The main one, of course, being the butt cleavage. There will be some people who will be none too pleased about that particular part of the costume design. Additionally, I also anticipate getting comments from chuds complaining that Milla Jovovich's boobs are too small for her to be Catwoman. I won't be covering that in this video, unfortunately. I may make the controversies the topic of a standalone video. I may include it in an updated video with the final design of this first iteration of the catsuit. I'm not sure yet, but I won't spend too much time on it in this video because as I was writing the script for that part of the video, it felt like there was too much of a harsh transition where I was switching gears to a completely different topic. The short version of my response to these inevitable criticisms is that, as it turns out, I just straight up don't give a fuck about outrage. And I'm all too happy to just let that nonsense be background noise I ignore while I continue to do whatever I want. The only reason I even mention it at all in this video, I guess, is just so I can have something to point to where I predicted the inevitable criticisms and, in no uncertain terms, made it crystal clear that I don't care about outrage. If you've made it this far in the video, it stands to reason that this fan fiction project I'm working on has you intrigued. There will definitely be more videos about the project on this channel, and aside from that, I am also working on a couple of mods for Skyrim, which I'm sure I'll also make videos about. And I am also currently working on a fantasy genre graphic novel, and I will certainly end up making videos about that when I get closer to a release date. Aside from that, I can't say for sure what other topics I'll cover on this channel. This channel is mostly just a creative outlet for me. I already said that I'm not going to chase the algorithm. I'm not overly concerned about channel growth, and I don't intend for this YouTube channel to replace my day job or anything like that. So the videos will probably end up being a mishmash of whatever subjects I feel like making a video about at any given time. I'm going to prioritize quality over quantity with my videos, Even this video you are watching right now went through about 3 different drafts and took a few weeks longer than I anticipated before I finally got something I was happy with. I'm going to use the videos I make as a way to push myself. I want to learn new skills or further hone skills I already have. All of that comes at the cost of time though, which means I won't be able to stick to a regular upload schedule. Hopefully there are enough people out there who don't mind videos on random topics and appreciate quality and effort enough that I'll eventually be able to grow this channel to a decent size, but if not, say lovey. So until next time, whenever that might be, bye-bye. Listen, people, I appreciate the enthusiasm, I really do. But at the time of the posting of this video, there are no other videos on this channel, and I don't have a Patreon to send you to or anything, so I really don't know what it is you're still doing here.